It is time for Cadillac Unscripted on 107.9 CDY. It's sponsored by Independent Bank and Marianne Quist of RE/MAX Central. And we've been approaching the COVID-19 crisis at various angles over the last few weeks. And now we wanted to take it from the church angle, the religious, the spiritual angle. And so we have with us whom today, Katy?
We have the head pastor of Zion Lutheran with us, Scott Torkko. And Scott is like a warm cup of coffee, Rich. You know, this is a guy you want to sit down and visit with. And I've attended Scott's church, and it's just such a welcoming group of people. And so I asked him for a few minutes of his time today. Good morning, Pastor.
Good morning. It's great to be with you.
So I forwarded some questions to Scott, but as we know, life has changed. And one thing that is constant, I think, in so many of our lives is our faith. And so I wanted to ask you how your world has changed and how you're bringing the church to the people.
Yeah, it is a significant change, and it seems like every day changes a little bit more. Every time I think I have a plan for the next few days, it just shifts, and so I've just been going day by day like many of your listeners and like many people in our country. So really it started on a Thursday night. It was announced that schools were going to be closed, and we already had a meeting called of our executive committee on that Friday morning, the next Friday morning. And so I invited a couple healthcare people from our congregation to sit down with our executive committee to figure out what we were going to do about worship and meetings. So we have three folks on our executive committee, and they admitted after the meeting they had come into that meeting convinced we were going to continue worshiping. That's who we are. That's what we do. They felt like we wouldn't be faithful if we weren't worshiping together on Sunday. And after listening to the couple of healthcare folks in our congregation, we all walked out of that meeting realizing that something had shifted significantly, and we weren't going to be able to worship in person for the foreseeable future. So that started the ball rolling about Facebook Live worship services, Zoom, which I have to admit I'd never heard of before. And so Zoom meetings taking place, and just trying to figure out how to do church differently than we'd ever done it before. In one way, it's been really hard. In another way, it's been energizing because after 16 years basically doing church the same way, trying to find new ways of being the church together, there's something exciting about that, as well as scary, and the times we're living in, of course, are not something I would want if I was going to ask for something. But there's something energizing and exciting about trying to find a new way to do something that we've done the same way for so long.
Scott, what was the reaction of the congregation when the message came out from the boss, from you, that they wouldn't be coming to church on Sunday?
Yeah, there was some disappointment. I think it ran the gamut, actually, right? So there were some who were disappointed that we weren't going to be getting together, who weren't quite sure that we were doing the right thing, maybe kind of making a mountain out of a molehill. And then there were others who just thought this was exactly the thing to do and were deeply appreciative, and a lot of people in the middle. What we did, we actually worshiped that very next Sunday, social distancing, hand sanitizer in all the pews, no sharing of the peace, no communion, just a very short service. And we had a retired doctor from the congregation stand up and address the congregation. And I think he has such a, Dr. Much has such a calming presence to him, and was able to explain and answer any questions that people had who had come to worship that day. So I think that was helpful as well.
You know what? I'm getting like a Laura Ingalls Wilder flashback with Doc. Remember, the community all kind of worked together on things, and Dr. Much was Doc kind of as he stood up and talked directly to the people about it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we owe our everyone in the healthcare field, a great deal of gratitude, obviously, right now, especially those, I know Dr. Anderson from our community has been online posting. These people, these healthcare workers, they just have a way of sticking to the science, kind of speaking, they're trained in this, right? Speaking very kindly and calmly and helping us to get on board with what's going on and what our part is in it.
Scott, some of your parishioners, Sunday's the only time they get out. I mean, that's their big day. They're going to come to church, and that's their community and their people. These shut-in folks, how are you reaching out to them?
That's been our biggest challenge, quite honestly. So one of the things, the thing that I've talked about at Zion over the past 6 months has been sort of our motto has been Zion Lutheran Church fosters connection with God, with our neighbors, and with each other. And so I've been trying to highlight that. So the first thing that came to my mind when I realized what was going on is how are we going to keep connected to each other? So we printed out our church directory. It ended up being about 22 pages long. I committed myself to making a phone call to every family in the congregation. I thought within the first 10 days, we're 3 weeks in, I have about 25 calls left out of 400, out of 200, I'm sorry, so I'm getting there. So that's one way, is I felt like I'm a connection for our congregation, and I need to hear what they're thinking and where they're at, and make sure everyone has what they need. So that was the first thing. The second thing I realized is I can't keep doing that myself. That just isn't something that can go on. It's not sustainable. So I gathered a group of 21 people. Each of them took a page, and every Sunday morning when we'd otherwise be worshiping, or every Sunday sometime during the day, every one of our members receives a phone call from someone in the church, and then those 21 email me any updates or prayer concerns or anything that I need to know. So that's one way that we've tried to go about it. The people without internet access are missing out on worship, so we're still working through how can we help them stay connected to their worship life, even though they can't connect in person in worship or by way of the internet.
And that was going to be my next question. How are you serving that segment of your population that does not have online access at home?
Yeah, if you got ideas, Rich, I'm open to them. we are. That is something we're just now coming to terms with. Dale Hansen, who is our ministries coordinator, has begun putting together a list of people that we know do not have internet access, possible ways to keep them connected to the life of the church and to our worship life, and then a list of people who can help us figure out how to do that. So as I listened to Jen Brown talk to you guys a couple of weeks ago, I heard her say, we're working on things. We don't have all the answers yet, and that's the case for us here too.
Scott, when you reached out to these families and started making these phone calls, what was the feedback that you got? What are you hearing from people?
I heard the things I expected I would hear, which is, things like I might say, like, boy, I never thought I'd be teaching my kids school, and it turns out they don't like me as their teacher very much, right? So I heard some of that. I heard some sense of boredom, but the thing that surprised me is the amount of gratitude people had about things that we would have otherwise and at other times in our lives thought to be very small.
Bingo.
So-and-so called me, and it was so great to hear from them. Every day, my child calls me to check in, tells me to stay home, and asks me if I need anything. So I have food today, and we have food for the next week, and I'm so grateful for that because as I look out in the grocery store, there's empty shelves in some place. I mean, it is amazing and remarkable, the things that I've heard that we've taken for granted along the way, that somehow now we are entirely grateful for.
Wow.
And I think we all hope that once this is all over with, Scott, that feeling will stick with us for a long time.
I hope so too. I've been thinking about a woman that I used to visit on internship in St. Paul, Minnesota, probably 2000. Evelyn was her name. I would go and visit with Evelyn. She was this dear old lady who just loved Jesus so much. So I would go to her high-rise apartment where older folks lived, place for older folks, and she would sit around a table with me. She would already have the hymns we were going to sing together. I can't sing a lick, but she already had the hymns that we were going to sing together put out in front of on the table. And every time when I would leave, before I would leave, she would get into her freezer, and she'd just pile food into a bag. They give me this food whether I need it or not. And I can't bear to throw it away. I want you to have it. She lived during the Depression, right?
Okay.
It had left an imprint on her, a scar on her. She could not bring herself to throw away the food that I would have otherwise thrown away myself. I think we're going to have an imprint on us after this. I think some of us are going to carry some scars that are going to change us for the foreseeable future.
Okay. What advice would you give our listeners about coping and about getting through the isolation and a lot of loneliness?
Yeah. So the first Sunday I preached after the news came out that we couldn't meet, I said there's 3 S's, and we're prepared for this as God's people because this is who we've been all along, and it's almost been practice for us along the way. Sacrifice, servanthood, and Sabbath. We're being called to a time of sacrifice, and for those who follow Jesus, we know that Jesus sacrificed his life for the greater good. So in what way can we find some satisfaction in sacrificing something that we may not want to, or that might be hard for us, and then sense that we're doing it for the common good? I think there's some energy, some sense of connection with the greater world around us when we begin seeing that we can sacrifice to help somebody else. There's something there that's important. The second S I mentioned was servanthood. So we're not all doctors and nurses and aides on the front lines of this thing, and yet we all have something. So one of the second graders in our congregation, his mother called me or texted me and said, "Who are our homebound folks? I need their addresses." Tristan is his name. Tristan would like to make a card for each of our homebound folks and send it to them.
Oh,
awesome.
If a second grader can find a way to use his gifts, I think we all need to be challenged to do that kind of thing. What do we have to offer someone? The other thing on Sundays that we've been trying to do, I've been trying to tell the congregation, find 1 or 2 people who you think might need a phone call today and call them. So every Sunday that we tape on Facebook Live, I ask folks to do a simple thing, but it breaks up the day for someone else, and it gives the caller a sense of satisfaction, too, that somehow I am valuable to someone else still, even though I'm, stuck in my home.
Okay.
Sacrifice, service, and the last S is Sabbath. So the Bible, for those of us who read the Bible and subscribe to what the Bible has to say, on the 7th day God rested, and it gave a balance and rhythm to life. That 6 days we work, on the 7th day we rest. Moses and the 10 Commandments. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. 6 days you shall work. On the 7th day, you shall rest. Right? Well, never before has the government told us that we need to take Sabbath. In fact, quite the opposite. Usually when things happen, keep spending your money, keep working. Don't let the cycle slow down. We got to keep on going. And suddenly the government has told us to stop. And I don't think that's such a bad thing. I think as I've listened to people over my 11 years here and 15 years of ministry, I've heard an increasing sense of movement and busyness, and at times it just sounds incredibly unsustainable to me. So to take a time of Sabbath, to take a time of rest, to reconnect with family, to reconnect with some of those smaller things that we kind of have lost track of along the way, I think there's a gift in it. And I think we ought to lean into that gift and see what slowing down might do for us. I've noticed, maybe you guys have too, a lot more people out walking, especially on those nice days. There's nothing else to do, really. You get tired of YouTube and Netflix at some point. And it's just been so amazing to see more people outside just walking. It feels like the olden, you mentioned Little House on the Prairie. It feels like the olden days again in some ways, right?
Yes, fresh air. Everybody needs to get some fresh air, Scott.
Yes, Yeah, I think there's something about slowing down and stopping that is healthy for us and for our society. Now, is it sustainable in the long term? Of course not. We need to get back to work. Sabbath is a day of rest from working. So eventually we have to, but can we just lean into these weeks or a few months and say, hey, what can we learn about just slowing ourselves down?
Okay, wow. What else do you have to share with our listeners, Scott, as we wrap up? Anything else we should be doing? We know we should be walking outside. I got to say, I'm going to invite you over to sing hymns sometime. I know you can dance, but I didn't realize that was part of your repertoire here, see, that you would come and sing hymns. That's awesome. What a great story.
Yeah. It is not. Only for Evelyn. Dear Evelyn, you couldn't say no to her. She had a way of making sure you couldn't say no. I don't think her neighbors appreciated it, actually. I think they probably didn't like it when I visited and sang.
Were the dogs howling? And the dogs were howling and people were flipping on her? I'm teasing.
Exactly. And if that's what you want, Katie, I'll come and do that. Okay. But most people wouldn't want that.
Oh, gosh. Well, both Rich and I are in the studio nodding at each other going, yep, he's right about that. Yep, that sounds right. And so I think you've given us a lot to think about today. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys. I was telling my wife, we have the Historical Museum. In 50 years, I just wonder if these conversations you're having with people, documenting how people are responding, if they're going to show up in a place like that, on the cloud, they can hit a button and hear some of your interviews. Because we're at a pivotal moment here, and you guys are doing such a remarkable job of finding the right people to talk to who tell the story of how life is changing right before our eyes. So thank you for all that you guys are doing.
You're welcome, and these are all going to be posted on YouTube and will be there forever. And if something should ever happen to YouTube, I'll load all these up on a flash drive somewhere and put them in a safe place.
And Scott,
I appreciate it.
And Scott, I'm so glad that you delegated the list. I mean, the thought of you calling 200 families over and over and over again, but. God love you for going for it and then realizing, okay, I need a little help with this. But that's amazing work. So
yeah,
wonderful.
It's not sustainable, but I just felt this deep need within me to check in with people. I wanted to make sure they were okay.
Yes, great. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, and God bless you and your congregation. And we're going to get through it.
And we have a remarkable community, and we're going to get through it together.
All right, thanks, Scott.
Buying a home is still the great American dream. And yes, it can be an intimidating process, but you can rest assured and have confidence when the professionals from RE/MAX Central are in your corner to guide you through it. Mary Ann Quist of RE/MAX Central has helped hundreds of home buyers in and around the Cadillac area navigate the process over the years, and she's ready to help you too. From start to finish, from finding a home to submitting an offer, to understanding the purchase agreement, to inspections, surveys, and appraisals, to the time when you finally sit down and sign those closing documents, Mary Ann will be there. When you're ready to buy, talk to Mary Ann Quist at RE/MAX Central. See her listings at teamquist.com. Just finished our conversation with Pastor Scott Torkko from Zion Lutheran Church in Cadillac, and on this edition of Cadillac Unscripted, we're taking a different angle. We've been talking about it from the educational angle. Last week, we talked with about a half a dozen seniors of the class of 2020 for Cadillac Area Public Schools and about how they're feeling about the potential of having their last couple of months of their senior year taken from them through no fault of their own. And now we're examining it from the spiritual angle. And who do we have, Katy?
So Jayson Godsey is the head pastor at Faith Baptist, and his congregation has grown and grown and grown, and Jayson is a dear friend. And so last week we were visiting a little bit, and he initially said, my first thought was, we're absolutely going to have church. This is what, can stand up through anything, any crisis, the people are going to come to the church. And then Jayson said things changed very quickly for you, and wisdom kind of came into your heart and mind. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. I initially thought as we were hearing the first reports of this virus that, we'll just go on. We've seen things like this before. And then as we saw the severity, as these numbers are growing exponentially, Our ministry and our mission hasn't changed. We still want to reach Wexford County and the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ, but how we're seeking to accomplish that on a daily basis, we had to just adjust a little bit. For example, our churches who did not have, our church that didn't have a great online presence, we've transitioned to more streaming services, online announcements, and online Bible studies with our kids and other things like that, just to accommodate some of the social distancing requirements as well as the large crowd assemblies. We're trying not to do that. And then personally, as a pastor, I've transitioned into spending more time in my office. I like to spend the time out in the community, but I want to spend more time here in my office that I can take those calls and pray and counsel with people that may be concerned. I want to be here when the concerned parent calls and says, what do I tell my 9-year-old little girl or little boy that about this virus, that's scared that maybe they're going to catch it? Or I want to be here to pray when an essential worker will stop by before or after a shift. Is they're going maybe to a hospital or going to a hospice call, or just after? Is they're concerned about, will I bring this virus home with me? And I want to be here so that I can pray with them, I can counsel with them. And so as a church, we've transitioned more to online, but personally, I've transitioned to be here more for people that might stop in, call, etc.
Okay. What was the response from your folks, from your congregation, when you let them know that you were moving to online church for the immediate future here?
Well, initially, our folks struggled with the idea a little bit. I think that most people want to be in their church. They want to be able to assemble together. It's the nature of a church, a called-out assembly. But over time, I think that just in talking about the public safety aspect of this and how we can help is, again, this thing is growing exponentially. I think they understood for a season why this is the smartest thing and the wisest thing to do, not just in a selfless thing to do, not just for themselves, who nobody ever thinks they're going to catch it, but for other folks. We have seniors, we have hospice nurses, we have hospital workers, and just for other folks' safety, I think they understand.
Okay, and when you say you're holding office hours, are these folks that have appointments with you, or they just kind of pop in because they've got anxiety and they want to pray and they need some reassurance from their pastor?
Yeah, I'm getting really a mixture of both. My folks, obviously they have my number and they call, and most of them are doing real well with this. We've tried to keep a line of communication open with them. But I've had a number of folks that have come around and knocked on the office door if they've seen my vehicle here or a vehicle here, or they've called the church. And some of them, just the other day, I had someone that was leaving a shift as an essential worker, and her concern is, I have 4 children at home. And I've just worked in an essential situation and around people that are sick and don't know if maybe I have this, and I'm going home to my children, and how do I reconcile that? And can you pray? And will God protect me? And just calming the nerves of people. It's a scary situation. It's a scary time. And so I've had a little bit of both.
Jayson, Faith Baptist is developed a reputation as an outreach church, bringing the church to the people. What are the folks in your congregation doing in terms of community outreach?
Yeah, so we have done a number of different things. We have a number of ladies that, including my wife, that have been sewing these washable and reusable masks now. They've been working with other folks. Again, we're seeing a groundswell of that here in our community. We have our folks that have taught classes. They're reaching out through FaceTime or through online ways. We've made a couple of videos for our bus children and our junior church children, just funny things where they're maybe it would play a game or sing a song with them. And we've been able to do that with just 1 or 2 or 3 people, just to let them know that we love them, we care. Our folks have been sending cards to people, just trying to let folks that maybe are on the fringe that aren't here every week, or folks that maybe their parents don't even come, but their children come, that there is a church here that loves them and that we want to reach out to them. If there's any way that we can help, we brought care packages to a number of folks that they've maybe gotten they're scared, they don't want to leave the house, but they need some supplies, and so they've called the church, and myself, my wife, other folks have just said, hey, we can bring those by, we can leave them on the porch for you, you don't have to come in contact with us, we'll give you a phone call when we're there, ring the doorbell, and just knock on the door and dash, and they're able to do that. We've just tried to find and fill gaps. We have so many great people in this community that we're just trying to fill those gaps that people are slipping through.
Do you have a sense of what percentage of your attenders, your regular attenders, are not online?
Yeah, it's actually fairly small with the rise now of Facebook. Mm-hmm. I think that other than my 86-year-old grandpa, I think just about everybody has some form of online. However, there are a few, and the ones that haven't, I've tried to make it a point. In fact, I was starting that here this morning. I'm calling through my congregational list. We have a system where we can send a mass phone call out, and instead of sending that mass phone call out where they'll hear me say, we're doing this or we're not doing this, I've just decided to call through and text through that list and speak to them personally and see how they're doing and if there's anything that they could use from the preacher.
Right. Jayson, you and I joked early last week. You said, boy, I don't know, am I considered essential? and it doesn't get more...
I'm still wondering about that. Jury's still out.
No, it doesn't get more essential than what you do. End-of-life visits, visiting people that are sick. How does that work for you now? You're a hands-on preacher.
With me personally, again, I'm going to do and follow the guidelines that, to the best of my ability, that our government, our local officials put in place. However, that being said, that's part of what I've been called to do. And if of course, I have 3 girls at home. I have the same concern that any parents would have in relationship to contact, but the fact is that this is what God has called me to do. And the safest place in the world for a preacher, anybody, is in the center of God's will. And so if for some unfortunate, reason I would contact this disease and that would be the end of my life because I was serving someone else, I don't know that I would want to go any other way. I'd much rather die on the battlefield than cowering somewhere, hoping for this to pass by. I'm just, I'd rather play offense than defense.
I see. Okay, thank you. For folks that are feeling lonely and overwhelmed and scared, what spiritual guidance would you give our listeners?
Well, I think Katy, I think what I would do, there are 3 things maybe that I've thought about. I've tried to implement it with our church members and with other folks that I've talked to, my family as well, which, again, my kids are as mad can be over this because they haven't missed a day of school. They're homeschooled. They're waiting for everyone else to go back to school. They think it's unfair. And
I love it. They're smart girls, too.
A couple of things. First, we need to focus and have faith in God. It's our relationship with God that produces stability in an unstable world. And there's no more instability than right now and uncertainty right now. And so we need to focus on something and someone that is unchanging and that we know has our best in his interest. There's a story in Matthew chapter number 14 of a terrible storm. The disciples are on a boat, and they see a figure of someone walking on the seas, and they're afraid, and they call out. They don't know who it is or what it is, and Jesus says, it's I, and Peter says, if it's really you, bid me to walk, come out to you. And he says, come on. And I'm paraphrasing here, and he steps out of the boat and he begins to walk on water. Now, he's doing something, absolutely miraculous here. We miss that sometimes, as long as his eyes are fixed on Christ. But then he begins to look at the winds and the waves and the storm around him, and he begins to sink. And I think the application here is simply this, is if we keep our eyes on the Savior and off the circumstances, that God will get us through this. And the second thing I think that was really important for us to do, and whether you're a person of faith or you're just someone that I just think this would help anyone, and that is turn off the news and go make some headlines for yourself. If I turn on the news very, very briefly, and it absolutely frightens me. The news, the reports, the conflicting reports, how bad it could be, how bad it might be, that can be overwhelming. It can be scary. And the fact of the matter is, I don't know that anyone has a true handle on it. And so, maybe if we turn the television off and we would go make headlines of our own. There are people that work 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and they say, I don't have time for my children. I don't have time to do this. You've got all the time in the world now to make some headlines with your children. Go make some memories that we can talk about years from now, about being locked up in our homes over the coronavirus. My wife, the other day, she had a girls' slumber party. I had to sleep in the garage. And she made, she had bags, and they had stuff in it, and popcorn tins, and they watched an old movie, and all slept upstairs, and it was just a big slumber party for the girls. And just find a way. There are folks that, again, are sewing masks. There are folks that are serving lunches to children at other Feed America and other things like that. Just try to give someone a smile. I was going through a local coffee establishment the other day, and somebody had given me a number of gift cards, and I pulled through, and I noticed there was a line a mile long behind me, and I pulled up, and I asked the lady, I said, you know what, I think everyone needs a smile. And she smiled at me, and I said, help me do something nice for someone. She said, sure. I said, lay behind me. I don't know what she's gotten. I don't care what she's gotten. Will you please pay for whatever it is back there? Let me pay for it. And she said, really? And I said, absolutely. And she said, what do you want me to say? I said, don't tell her anything at all. I just ask her to give you a smile. And I went by a day later to get my coffee, same place, and I was checking out, at the drive-through, and a lady from inside yelled, "Preacher, preacher!" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "You're not going to believe that went on for about 5 cars."
Oh, I see.
Someone paid for someone else that paid for someone else, and they all had a big smile on their face. "Preacher, that was so much fun." And I think she wanted me to do it again, but I only had enough for my coffee that day.
It's interesting when that happens in a drive-through line. It's not pay it forward; it's almost pay it backward.
Oh, funny! I love it. I love it.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. The funny thing is, I had 2 gift cards, and I don't know exactly what was on them. And I drink black coffee, so I ordered a medium black coffee, and I handed her both the gift cards. And when I was done, she said, "I need $5.50 extra." And I said, what in the... She must have ordered for her whole office. I don't know who it was, but there's an office somewhere that owes me a coffee.
Oh, my goodness. See, you made us smile this morning. Thank you so much, Pastor Jayson Godsey from Faith Baptist, for giving us a smile, And we really appreciate everything that you shared with us today.
Well, I appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity. Thank you so much. And again... we are sometimes we just need to relax a little bit. This is serious. This is very, very serious. I understand that, but we'll get through it. We're absolutely going to get through it. We have a tendency to exaggerate our place in history when crises come, and we tend to make them larger than they are. We got through Y2K, anthrax, West Nile, SARS, Ebola, the economy, bird flu, swine flu, and everything else, and we will get through this. Remember, no problem has eternal life.
Okay, well, that is a perfect note to end on. God bless, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Katy. Have a great day.